Welcome to A Wealthy Life. My name's Vicky Washay and I'm the host. The aim of this show is to help you pinpoint your values and create a plan to live your version of a truly wealthy life, doing more of what you want, more of what you love, with those that matter to you most. And that will take time, money, and control to create this life of your dreams. I've had times when I've had to track literally every penny, shouldering massive debt. And then, after being made redundant and a divorce, I decided I needed to create an independent source of income, something away from traditional employment. I began investing in 2004, and during the property crash of 2009-10, I bought on average 1 to 2 properties a month. After just 2 years of focused investment, I'd secured my financial future. By 2013, I'd been recognized by The Telegraph as one of the UK's top 25 most influential people in property. I've authored 5 books, and property investment has been my ticket to a life of financial security, fun, freedom, adventure, great holidays. It's a life guided by my values and not societal norms. So why not subscribe now and become inspired to create your own wealthy life?
Hello. So, what is the number one rule of investing in property? I find that this question really frustrates me. You often see it posted on Facebook, and if you do a bit of digging, it's often from somebody who is fairly new, reasonably inexperienced, maybe somebody who's come out of a property course. They're very passionate, which is great. We've all been there. And what they're looking to do is sort of engage in the community and maybe raise their social media profile and things like that. But they're also very rigid in their answers. And I know when I first came out of property investing way back, my first course would have been maybe 2004 briefly, and then again in 2008. I absolutely took everything in that the trainer said, and they became not just my rules, my Bible, my process. They became tattooed into my heart, tattooed into my brain. They ran through my blood. And if you disagreed, then you couldn't be right because I'd been to this trainer and this trainer had told me how. But the truth of the matter is, there is no one right rule. There is no one answer that tells you this is exactly the way that you can invest in property, because there are too many variables for that to hold true. We are all too different. We want different things. We come from different places in our journeys, in our finance, in our experience. And so it's very much got to be a sort of a recipe of rules, really, and then looking at how you have your resources, how you have your time, how you have your knowledge, and most importantly, what it is that you want to get out of investing in property. You start to prioritize those rules to then tell you the way forward that is right for you, most likely right for you. And what's right for me might not be right for you, and what's right for you won't be right for somebody other. So it's really about understanding that there are different approaches. So my name, as you know, is Vicky Washay, and on this podcast, we talk about all things property investing, but also mindset and understanding the finances. And I think that this episode is really going to pull all of those things together. So we're going to be talking about property investing, but also understanding how the output, the finances that you want, also tie in with your mindset. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. So there are plenty of people who are operating, if you like, various property techniques, from serviced accommodation. Now, serviced accommodation is really an all-encompassing word and a non-branded word for Airbnb. So this is where you're taking a property, and instead of renting it out by the house or by the room, the focus is renting it out by the night. So that's serviced accommodation. You also have people who are operating HMO strategies. And now when you think about an HMO, you're taking the building and you're looking to rent it out, not by the time period so much as by the unit, the room. How many rooms are there in this property? And that's what you're renting out individually. And then, of course, there are people who are doing rent-to-rent strategies. And a rent-to-rent strategy is a little more complicated in that you don't own the property. Now what you're doing is you're renting the property from one person, and you are then subletting it out to others. Maybe you are renting it in order to service accommodation, the property, Airbnb it, or maybe you are renting it in order to rent it out by the room as an HMO. So you could be doing any of these. But as you can see, the more that you start to layer things, the more people that get involved, the more complex these strategies get, the more time that it needs of your time in order to pay attention to make it work, and also the more money that it needs to generate, because you now have to pay so many more people. If you own a property and you rent it for whatever reason, you are the primary person, well, after the bank, obviously, you are the primary person looking to make money out of the property. If you rent it, hold on, a cat. This cat is driving me insane. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm really sorry. I don't know where I was. I'm just going to go back over that bit about technique again. So there are people that are operating a number of techniques, and some of them will be doing things like serviced accommodation. And that's sort of a non-branded way of saying Airbnb. You are taking a property, and rather than thinking about it as a unit or as a number of rooms, you are thinking about the number of days or nights that you are going to rent this property to people. So your primary focus is filling the room on a night by night basis. And of course, that could be for a week, but it's the night by nightness of it that matters. Or you could be doing something like an HMO strategy, houses of multiple occupancy, often sometimes student houses. And this is where you are now not focused on the time that you rent it or the unit that you rent, but the sub rooms. So you are renting it out room by room. And of course, then there are more complex and more involved versions of this where you rent to rent. So now you don't own a property at all. You control a property, you rent the property from a landlord, and in that process, have permission to then sublet it out to others. And what you might do is rent from one landlord and then choose to follow the serviced accommodation strategy. So you're committed to paying the landlord a monthly fee, and you are now going to rent it out room by room. And yes, a room rate is more than 30 times a night rate. So your month is 30 days long, let's say. Your room rate is more than 1/30th. So this is why you're doing it, because you can charge a higher amount per night, but you still have a commitment to a landlord where they are thinking they want 30 days worth of value. If you only rent that property out for 10 and the money doesn't cover the monthly expenses that you have, which would be your obviously the landlord that you're renting it from, it will be utility bills because they will fall to you, it will be repairs, all of that sort of stuff. If you don't make enough money to cover that, then that's where the layers of complexity comes in. So there's pressure to rent out at the right rate for the right number of nights in that rent to serviced accommodation strategy. If you do it the other way around, where you do rent to rent is traditionally rent to HMO. So you're looking to rent the property instead of as a house, you're going to break it up and rent it as the individual rooms. That's fine, but you'll find that the type of tenant that lives in a room rather than an entire unit, a flat or a house, is someone that won't necessarily be staying for a year, 3 years, 5 years. So they're going to turn over a lot more. And if, for example, you have 4, 5, 6 rooms in a property, you're going to have to rotate those and make sure that they are all filled. Because the likelihood with an HMO strategy is that, roughly speaking, it depends on interest rates, but a couple of the rooms will pay the mortgage to the landlord who owns it, or to the lender if you're using a loan. And then you've got one room that you cover for overheads. So again, you're liable for the utility bills, so you have to pay all of that. If you've only got 4 rooms, the 4th room is your profit. If you've got 5 or 6 rooms, then you've probably got a bit more profit in there, but you've also got to cover all the repair costs again. So you can see that you can take these different strategies and you can layer complexity on them. Or you can be completely vanilla, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with vanilla as a flavor. You could be completely vanilla and you can just buy a house the traditional way with a buy-to-let mortgage, rent it out to one family, the entire unit, all 3 bedrooms, if that's what you've got, and just collect your money on a monthly basis. You can see that there is more time and more risk the more complex you make these strategies. But there are people making a go of these, and that is fine and it's working for them. But if I think of myself, I don't want to be that involved in the property. I have other things that I want to do. And that's where we come down to it. There is no one rule that is absolutely the golden hard rule for absolutely everybody, because everybody comes from a different place with a different level of experience and a different objective. So let's look at what these components, if you like, of the rules could be. So one of the things for me is, what is the overarching strategy? Why are you investing in property? What is it that you want property to give you? And we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing is, what are the resources that you've got to bring to the table? So how much money do you have? How much time do you have? Do you have any knowledge or contacts or experience? And then the other thing for me, which is really important, are your values. How risk averse are you? How much do you want security? How much do you thrive on variety? And looking at all of those, that whole recipe then comes together and then says, actually, you know what? These particular investment techniques are those that are most likely to work for you, rather than the one hard rule. And I would say, for me, there is still one hard rule, even over above all the rest, and that is cash flow. Because if you are not making money on a monthly basis, if you are not able to fund the costs of your property investment technique, whatever it is not a business, it is not an investment, it's, I don't know, not a business. I don't know what a not a business is. What is a business that doesn't make a profit? Something that's going to go bankrupt or fall over at some point. So you've got to bear in mind how all of this works. Now let's go back and take each one of those 3 again. So if we think about your overarching strategy, why do you want to invest in property? Bear in mind, my bias is going to be towards cash flow, but I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible for a moment to explain this to you. So on the one hand, you could be looking for cash flow. And what I mean by that is something that creates money on a monthly basis. That's typically what we mean by cash flow. Positive cash flow, profit, if you like. And we'll just forget tax for a minute, but pre-tax profit, that's what you're looking for. After the rent comes in, all the expenses go out, there is money left. That surplus is what you're looking for. We'll explain why in a minute. On the other hand, what you might be looking for, and there may be various reasons why you're attracted to this, is lumps of money that come from the sale of the asset, and they are often referred to as capital or capital gain. Now, this can happen when you buy a plot of land and you build on it, and then you bought the land, you built the houses, you sell off the houses or the flats or whatever it was that you built, and there is a profit to be had there. That profit is your capital gain, and you'll have heard those words. Now, that's quite attractive to some people because it's large, hopefully, if you get it all right, large lumps of money. But just think about this scenario for a minute. So here you are at work or maybe running your own business, and you want to change. Maybe you want to get married and start a family. Maybe you have a family and you actually quite like to see them and not work as hard as you do. Maybe you're sick of your boss. Maybe you are your own boss and you've had enough of you. You want a change of some sort. And so what you're actually thinking about is, I would like to replace my wages in a way that allows me to think of another way of earning money if I want to, that is not reliant on me going to work every day, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, that classic. If only you did do it only Monday to Friday and 9 to 5, you're probably doing it 7 till 7 and 7 days a week, because our offices are in our phones now. So you want a change. In order to have a change, that change is uncertainty. On the other hand, what complements that is some sort of security. And the security could come from a regular monthly income from a property portfolio. And it might start off as £500 and then 1,000 and then 3,000 and maybe 5,000, whatever numbers you want to head towards. But that monthly income coming in would give you the confidence, the financial security to be able to make changes in another part of your life. You can plan ahead for this. If you're young now and you're only in your 20s, early 30s, and you haven't started your family, but you want one, you could start investing now before you get to that stage and know that you have an alternative stream of income coming in. If you are older and you don't want to wait until the government gives you permission to stop work, this so-called retirement, you could then be in a position where you can go, well, do you know what? I don't want to wait till I'm 65, 66, 67, 69, whatever the number I'm chasing is. I want to do it on my terms. Plan ahead. How much money do you think you're going to need? How many properties or what properties does that relate to? How can I start investing in property and generating this side income now while I'm still okay going to work, but I know that I want something different in the future? So you've got a whole range there, haven't you? From someone young starting out to someone older wanting to stop work. It's usually about changing work when I speak to people, or it's about women who want additional financial security because they know that when they have children that they have to give up work, or that their careers are going to be altered or interrupted in some way, and they still want to have that financial independence they did when they were single or pre-children. So what is your overarching goal? What is driving you? Now think about the difference between cash flow and capital. You can get monthly reassurance from your monthly cash flow coming in from straightforward rental properties if you're pursuing a cash flow strategy, to, if you go the other way, waiting and waiting and waiting and hoping that this large sum is going to drop in on the sale, and that the sum that drops will be as big as you hoped it would be. There is a bigger timeline, there is a bigger risk, there is more of a gamble, and you might be comfortable with that. And that's why lots of people do development. But I also believe that the people who are doing development, and whether it's buying and flipping or building new properties or taking over properties and going, and you'll have heard from Hayley, she's coming on again in a few weeks' time, and she's really talking about development like this. She's very experienced. And so a lot of people doing that strategy, which I happen to believe is a more advanced strategy, have got property miles under their belt. That's not the first thing they go for. It isn't the first technique they think, I tell you what, I'm going to invest in property and I'm going to take all my money and gamble it that at some point in the future, which I've planned and hope for, that this is going to come back and it's going to be, instead of, a bit like the shoes and the elves and the shoemaker, or the golden goose, that instead of getting one egg, I'm going to get two eggs. Instead of getting one pair of shoes, I'm going to get two pairs of shoes. That somehow your money is going to multiply, but you're reliant on others, because unless you are the builder, unless you are the architect, and the lender probably as well, then actually being able to control all of the variables there are much harder for you. So quite likely when you're starting out in your journey that you will look for cash flow. And then it's not necessarily something that you have to do for the rest of your life. You can move on, because actually your awareness of your values, your awareness of your attitude to risk will change. But the other thing that is going to impact you right at the beginning is not just why you want to invest, but how are you going to do it? What are your resources? What money do you have? What time do you have? How are you going to make this work? Now, if you are currently working full time, and this is part of your strategy to change the way you work, either to bring your retirement forward or to allow you to step out of the workplace or your own business, you may not have the time to fully manage everything right now. It might be something that you have to build up to. And therefore, working with somebody who's got more experience, or a mentor, or someone who can find the properties for you, a sourcing agent. And you know that I'm both that. I am both the mentor and the sourcing agent to my clients. I help find the properties, but I also work with them throughout the year to make sure that that property becomes part of a cash flowing business. So you might need more help to start. Then as you learn, you might then choose to branch out on your own doing buy-to-let, or you might then choose to change investment techniques and do something else. But you can only do that because you had the right number of resources available to start you. So you had some money, you had some time, you maybe did or didn't have knowledge or contacts, and you fill in the gaps. So if you have the money and you don't have the time, you would probably come and work with me like my clients do. They don't have the time to be handling all of the background searching, doing all the research, managing the letting agent and everything else like that. And that's the role that I play. I'm sort of that project manager role. So if you don't have the time, then working with somebody else could be the way forward. If you have the time and maybe you have some knowledge and some contacts, but you don't have the money, then that might be why you pick those more time intensive strategies that I was talking to you before. And you probably would start with something like rent to rent. And I hope at some point in the not too distant future to be able to speak to Francis Dolly about rent to rent. So you've got to understand your resources as well as understanding what's driving you forward. But before you can now launch in, what I would say is almost like one of the keys to success. It's not the only key, remember, there's no right answer, but one of the keys to success is understanding your values. If you understand what's important to you, do you value freedom? Do you value security? Do you like risk or mitigated risk? Or are you completely risk adverse? Understanding those sides of your personality, those traits, those values, as I've said, is really important to helping you make that match with the investment technique. Because there are some investment techniques that are more risky. They are more stressful. They require more time. They involve more uncertainty. And if those are things that you do not like, you totally value your time with your family, not at work. You really are very controlling over your money. You like financial security. You're really quite risk averse. Taking on something that is a large lump of money that goes into a development, or even something where you have to generate so much income in order to pay back all the people that you are committed to, whether it's joint venture partners or rent to rent landlords, etc., that can be causing you stress. And if that causes you stress because it's rubbing up against your values in a way that is not helpful, is not growing you in any way, it's actually frustrating you and making you stressed, then even if you've picked a technique that on paper should absolutely work for you, you've got the money, we know what you want, let's go ahead and do it, but it's not working and you're not enjoying it, it's because the technique's not right for you. It could be that property investing's not right for you. I spoke with a client recently and they took all the paperwork I gave them and they ran all of the numbers and they can't see how people make money from investing in property, and they can't see why people would invest in property. And I'm a bit struck to, how do I explain it to you? Because if you don't see it with what I've shown you, then maybe there is something further back that you are more risk averse. And if I actually do think about it, I know a bit about the client and they work in specific finance fields. And I understand that every time I've spoken to someone who is in, for example, hedge funds and that sort of level of finance in the city, they aren't fond of investing in property because they see the way that they do it as being a more secure way. They don't see the benefits. So the benefits are, even if you follow a cash flow strategy, which for me is my personal number one rule, not the number one rule, because there are many rules and it's got to be the right rule for you. But I believe cash flow is important because without that, I can't pay the bills. Then if I'm following a cash flowing strategy, I am also benefiting from a slow burn capital gain on my properties because I'm holding for the long term. So the goal is, without me doing anything, that property will increase in value. We live on an island. We know there's not enough property. Clients that I helped buy property at around the £100,000 mark in 2021, those houses are now selling on the market for 140. My clients aren't selling just to make 30,000 profit, because it's not just 30,000. There's all the buy-in costs, there's all the sell-out costs. They probably would walk away with 15 maybe after capital gains. They don't want just 15,000. They prefer to have years and years and years of cash flow, building the equity in the property. So if at some point in the future they decide to sell one of the portfolio they've got, they can have that capital gain. But they're not constantly remortgaging. They're holding the mortgage value, the loan to value at the level that it is, and they are benefiting from the cash flow. They don't need to use that money right now for some of them. And so they're keeping it in their limited companies, and then they're using it to buy the next property and buy the next property until they have reached a level where they are happy with the number of properties they hold and the income that they're getting for the plans that we created right at the beginning. They're wise. So if you think through what I'm saying to you, you will see stuff on Facebook from all sorts of people asking you all sorts of questions to get involved. They'll start debates. Some of them get a bit heated. Some of the groups can get a bit grumpy with one another. But at the end of it, it's a Facebook post. And I think what you really need to, and I don't mean to tell you what to do, I'm sure you know this already, but I'm still going to say these words because it's my style, sorry. What I think you really need to do, what I believe and what I know you really need to do is step out of the social media, step out of the razzmatazz, the flash, get rich quick, I can do all of this for you, and think, hold on a second. Here is potentially an investment opportunity for me. This investment opportunity, rather than buying shares or gold or graves or solar panels or rice somewhere in the wherever, it's about investing in property in the UK. What do I know about it? Well, I bought my own house. I see houses in the street that I live. That's about all I can do. So now what you've got to think is why? And I've done podcasts on this before. If you can't answer the question why, don't go any further. Answer the question why first. Why might you want to invest in property? What would the benefit be for you? What is the purpose? And if we just now stop being very nice and covering both sides of it, and I'm just going to talk about cash flow, for whatever reason, whether it's financial security or plans that you want to change in the way that you work right now, you want cash flow. You want some sort of monthly income because that would make you feel more financially secure, maybe more financially resilient. Perfect. That is something that property can do for you that shares can't. They tend to pay out on an annual basis or if you sell them. So property investment would fulfill that why. It would give you a monthly cash flow, a monthly surplus after the tenants paid the rent and all the expenses have been paid. Good. Okay. Now, before we get into the absolute details of the how, what are you bringing to the table? What are the resources that you can bring forward? Do you have money to invest? And quite frankly, I've been producing another webinar for a group called Female Invest, which is one of the websites that I've been doing a lot of speaking on recently. And I'm talking about financial resilience. And what I was saying there is when you're looking at your money, you need to understand how much it could earn in various places. And literally today, I've just had a look online and there are savings accounts that will get you 5%. I then looked at the 4 properties that I'm arranging for clients at the moment, and the return, just the monthly net return. Yes, there's still tax to pay, but there's tax to pay on everything. So pre-tax on everything, they would be getting 7.1 on a simple house, maybe 8 or 9% on a flat, because obviously there were smaller costs involved. It was a smaller unit, but with some very good rents. And then there is a bigger block that a client is looking to buy, where we're talking about just short of 500,000, and they're going to get 12% return. So there are different rates of return. Now, just thinking about those 3 things, there are risks attached. So a 7% return on a house that you buy and you return. And when I talk about this return, I'm talking about net figures. I've taken into account refurb budgets. I've taken into account stamp duty and everything else. So this is like the bottom line out of all of the figures for that first year. It's a straightforward house. We already know that there is a tenant in there and it's simple. This tenant is in there. We've got a repair history. We know what's coming up. It's all been accounted for in the budget, and the client is going to get the equivalent of a 7% return on the money that they invest. At the other end of the spectrum, the client is looking to buy a larger block that has been split into flats, they will only get the 12% if all of the 5 flats are rented. If one of those becomes empty for a while, then they won't get that return. And so, yes, you're potentially getting more return, but you're having to put in 3-4 times the amount of money. Yes, you're getting more rent because you've got 5 little units in there, but only if all of those 5 are occupied at all the time. And of course, there can be a churn. A family tends to stay in a house for a lot longer than somebody would stay in a 1-bed flat. So everything is different. And so you really need to start understanding this. And then we layer in the time issue. How much time have you got? Do you want to do it yourself and work with the letting agent that you find? Do you want to work with someone like me who's a sourcing agent who can manage the whole process for you? And bear in mind, not everybody offers the level of service that I do. Some of them just find you the deals and then leave you to it. So there's different ways. So now you're thinking about, I've got some money, I've got this amount of time. Now I can narrow it down again. I've been looking at cash flow strategies because we went that way. And this is what I think is right for me. I want to invest in houses and I want someone who can help with me like Vicky can. And that's the route I'm going to take. So now you've cleared that how up. And then, certainly if you work with me, we will be looking at what your values are. Think about, is that going to give you what you need over and above the money? Are you going to feel comfortable? How do you feel about the risk? Have you identified what the risks are to you personally of investing in property? What could go wrong? How would you mitigate that? And then if you're comfortable with the risk, how do you feel about the level of security that you will have? Do you feel secure in this investment? Does this investment make you feel more financially resilient now than before you bought it? Or would it make you feel more financially resilient than before you bought it? And if you can sort of start to answer those questions, then you can go that next step forward and go, okay, I know why I'm doing it. I know what I'm bringing to the table. I know what I've got. I know what I lack. I know where the gaps are and I know how to fill them. And I know how this is going to fit nicely with my personal style, my personality, my values. Because at the end of this, I just think if the difference is even 5%, right? Why would you try and invest and get 5% more, but have a load of stress when you could just leave it in the bank? If you're not comfortable, leave the money in the bank. Obviously, just in a proper savings account, etc., but leave it in the bank. If you're not comfortable, don't do this. Do this when you really understand what it is that you are getting into. And that's certainly something that I spend a lot of time doing when I'm speaking to my clients. I am a mitigated risk taker. I think I am, compared with a lot of people in the country, quite a risk taker. I think within the property world, I'm maybe not as much of a risk taker as a lot of other people. I've seen a lot of people take a lot of risks and sometimes it's paid out for them and sometimes they've gone under. So I'm not a huge risk taker. I like to understand the risk that I'm getting into. I like to make sure where possible, I have thought, okay, if the worst happens, what could I do? What can I have in place now so that if that happened, it's not a problem? So take, for example, what if there was a damage or repairs required at the property? If it was simple repairs, then I would have a reserve. If it was damage to the property in some way, I would have an insurance claim. So I would have insurance. Well, legally, you really need it anyway, but that's beside the point. But, I'm now mitigating those risks. I'm thinking through what happens. What if I don't get the rent paid? What happens if the tenant damages the property? What happens if this? What happens if that? So I have mitigated my risks. And some of that has come with experience. Absolutely. Some of those things I've stumbled on and gone, oh, crikey, I didn't think of that. And I now have that as part of my systems and my practice. But I've mitigated these risks. Because at the end of this, I like security. I do like security. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this for a buzz. I'm doing this because I like the cash flow. The extra cash flow gives me the lifestyle that I want, allows me to have the holidays, allows me to buy anything that I want to buy because I've got set income coming in that covers my overheads, and the property income is what pays for my wealthy life. So I have been through this process myself. I take my clients through this process, and I really encourage you to go through this process. There is no one right answer. Having said that, in brackets, behind my hands, I will still say to you, cash flow is still king. Cash flow is absolutely vital. Don't get into any deal that requires you to feed it. And I've been there very early on in my career as well. You know, here, buy this flat, it's very cheap, but you're going to have to top up the mortgage. Lenders won't even allow that anymore. There won't be the coverage there from a lender. So it's just not possible. So think through, what do you want to get out of property investing? That's the rule. What do you want to get out of property investing? How is it going to make your life better? That's the question to answer. So I hope I've been able to put some whoosh into your life. I hope I've got you thinking. Maybe the key points out of this is there's no one hard rule. It's different for everybody. In brackets, cash flow is king. And then number two, what do you want to get out of it? What is your overarching strategy? What are you going to bring to the table to leverage? What are the finances that you can bring? What's the time, the knowledge, the contacts you can bring? And how can we make those work harder for you? Maybe doing it on your own, or maybe doing it with somebody else. And how is this going to make you feel, your values? Is this going to satisfy you? Are you going to feel better for having this investment? And if you're not, maybe don't do it yet. Maybe work out why you're not going to feel better first, rather than go down that route. So I hope I've given you plenty to think about. We're going to get back next week to a lot more property podcasts over the next couple of weeks. And I look forward to speaking to you with some of my wonderful guests that I know are coming up. I wish you all the very best. I certainly wish you a wealthy life. My name is Vicky Wishay. Thank you for listening.
My mission is to help people like you understand what a wealthy life truly entails. Together, we'll identify your ideal lifestyle, leverage your resources to generate the necessary income through property investment, whether by teaching you how or by managing the process on your behalf. Let's inject some momentum into your wealthy life plans as you subscribe now to capture every episode of the podcast. And then get in touch via my website, book a call. All of the details are in the show notes.